Hi, welcome back. Today I'll be talking to you about another game where people take pills to escape reality. It's wonderful, it's twisted, it's Fran. Fran is a point-and-click side-scrolling game told through the eyes of a 10-year-old girl who suffered trauma after seeing her parents ripped to shreds. This horror game was created by Kill Monday Games, an indie studio in Sweden founded by Natalia and Isaac Martinson. The game takes place in the 1940s, back when mental health was just starting to change treatment methodologies. However, in this story, Fran's life within the walls of the psych ward is quite barbaric. The game is divided into 5 chapters that depict different worlds that Fran has stumbled into on her journey to get back home. Each chapter allows for Fran to explore her surroundings and find out more about what really happened to her parents. This game is incredibly important because it is a narrative-driven point-and-click game. Many of these types of games don't present compelling narratives, but for Fran, this isn't the case. The story is told in little boxes of dialogue without voice acting. The story is told completely through visuals with a soundtrack to match the game's tone. The game jumps into ignition once her psychologist, Dr. Dürn, administers her first dose of duotine. The pills cause what could be interpreted as hallucinations, or even different realms. This is where the horror part comes in. Fran's hallucinations are strongest when she is at the Oswald Asylum and with her Aunt Grace. This could be because the doctors at the asylum and Aunt Grace have been performing gruesome experiments on her. Each of the chapters feature different important characters which usually do not end up appearing more than once, with the exception to Mr. Midnight and Dr. Deern. As Fran gets to know the strange characters, she pieces together what really happened to her parents. In my opinion, the characters are what really make this game stand out. Not only do they look visually unique, but the way they talk is completely different from one another. I've been taught in my other writing classes that good dialogue is written when the readers can tell who's talking without the script even having to say who's doing it, and I definitely say that this is true for Fran. I've fallen in love with each and every one of these characters, but all for completely different reasons. No two characters feel the same. Now, I do have a main criticism about the game's story, but it's also what drew me into play in the first place. Let's talk about the story's ambiguity. While it could be argued that Fran is simply imagining these worlds and characters to cope with trauma, the studio has created another game that takes place in the same world. They even mention some of the same characters, which brings me to believe that whatever Fran was seeing was actually real, and the duotine was just used to travel through these different realities. It's kind of hard to say for sure though. At the end of the game, Dr. Oswald tells Fran that he had been the one to kill her parents. He had been conducting research on twins, and Fran's mother was part of that research. Fran was the only daughter of a twin that Dr. Oswald had been researching, so he claims to have murdered her parents to trigger Fran's ability to travel between realms. Now, that all makes sense to me, but then Dr. Oswald shoots Fran, and then Fran heals and rides off into the sunset on an axolotl. Kinda weird. Considering this is categorized as a psychological thriller, I have trouble deciding whether Fran died and that's her idea of heaven, or if what we saw is literally what happened. Kill Monday Games claims it's up for interpretation, but then again that was before the release of Little Misfortune, which pretty much confirms that the realities Fran sees are real. I'm a big fan of psychological horror games, but for some reason the ending feels very unsatisfying to me because I'm not really sure how to feel. It almost doesn't even feel like a psychological horror anymore because at the end, the final chapter basically confirms that everything Fran saw was real. But that being said, I'm not super upset about it, and I've replayed this game many times because I find it so enjoyable. If you're looking for an engaging, cool, point-and-click adventure game, then I'd say look no further. Fran is a fantastic game that completely deserves more love. In total, the game takes about 7 hours to complete, but the story will leave you thinking about it for much longer.